The alien commanders hovered above Earth in their massive warships, observing the once thriving planet now lying in ruins. From their vantage point, they could see the devastation they had wrought: cities reduced to rubble, smoke billowing from burning landscapes, and the few remaining human strongholds crumbling under relentless bombardment. The alien fleet was immense, its size dwarfing anything humanity had ever seen. Their technology was far superior, and after months of calculated, brutal assaults, they had finally broken through Earth's last line of defense. It was only a matter of time before humanity would be erased entirely. One of the lead commanders, standing tall in the command center of the flagship, gazed at the holographic display before him. The map of Earth was marked with red, indicating their dominance. Reports of human surrender were flooding in from all over the planet. It was a swift, decisive victory. The commander's cold, reptilian eyes scanned the data, confirming what he already knew: Earth's defeat was imminent. "We've intercepted the final communication from the human leadership," a subordinate reported, his voice devoid of emotion. "They've declared surrender. The remaining military forces are scattered and disorganized. They won't last long." The commander nodded, indifferent to the suffering below. To him, Earth was just another conquest, another mark in their empire's ever-growing list of triumphs. Humanity had proven weak, disorganized, and predictable. Despite their initial resistance, their defenses had crumbled under the superior might of the alien war machine. The commanders had expected more from a species that had developed space travel, but humanity had been disappointingly easy to defeat. "Ensure that no escape vessels leave the planet," the commander ordered. "We must eliminate any potential threats before we move on." The alien fleet had been watching humanity for years, studying their weaknesses. The plan to invade Earth had been meticulously crafted, taking advantage of the political infighting and constant conflicts among the human nations. The commanders knew that humanity's downfall wouldn't be in their technology, but in their inability to work together. And now, standing on the brink of victory, the alien commanders saw their beliefs validated. "There is no hope left for these humans," one of the commanders said, his tone dismissive. "Their leaders are weak, their people divided. They won't unite. We have nothing to fear," another commander chimed in. "Their resistance was feeble at best. Their forces couldn't hold their own even with their combined efforts. They're too divided by greed and power struggles." This was inevitable. They all shared the same view: humanity's internal divisions had sealed their fate. Their arrogance blinded them to the truth that would soon challenge their assumptions. Meanwhile, on the ground, the remnants of Earth's military forces struggled to maintain any semblance of order. The global defense fleet, once hailed as the best in human history, had been shattered. In underground bunkers and hidden command posts, military leaders from different nations argued over the next steps. They knew their resources were dwindling, and hope was fading fast. Communications had been severed with many regions, and what remained of humanity's global forces were scattered and leaderless. The American admiral, known for his defiant spirit, slammed his fist on the table. "We can't keep fighting like this. Our forces are in chaos. We're losing ground with every passing hour. We need to regroup." An older European general shook his head. "Regroup with what? We have nothing left. The aliens have outgunned us at every turn. Our supply lines are broken. Our fleets can't match theirs." A representative from a private military corporation, who had been involved in off-world resource exploration, spoke up. "Maybe it's time we accept defeat. We're talking about survival now, not victory. We can negotiate terms, try to save what's left." Tensions flared. There was no consensus, only fragmented ideas, half-baked strategies that didn't align. Some were ready to retreat into underground bunkers or launch rogue guerrilla strikes, while others clung to the fading hope that some miracle would save them. The human factions were crippled by mistrust. Nations and corporations had long been at odds, even during the early stages of the alien invasion. As the alien forces pressed their advantage, the divisions between them had only deepened. Commanders and generals argued endlessly over who would lead the remaining forces, who would control the few remaining resources. The aliens had capitalized on this fragmentation, striking when humanity was at its most vulnerable. It seemed hopeless. Earth had been defeated not just by the aliens but by its own inability to unite. But in the chaos, a few voices of reason began to rise. Among them was a young military strategist who had seen firsthand the devastation caused by division. "We need to stop this infighting," she said, her voice calm but firm. "If we don't come together now, we're finished. We have one last chance to fight back, but we can't do it divided." Her words were met with skepticism, but they struck a chord with some of the more level-headed leaders in the room. "We don't have the luxury of time," the Admiral added. "We either unite and fight as one or we perish separately. It's that simple." Secret talks began to take place among the leaders. Away from the bickering and mistrust, they started to realize the truth of their situation. If humanity was to survive, they would need to put aside their differences and fight as a single force. The divisions that had crippled their defense up to this point needed to be healed, or all hope would be lost. In hidden bunkers across the globe, the message began to spread: unity or extinction. Leaders reached out across political, military, and corporate lines, starting to forge the alliances they should have made long before the invasion. The process was slow, and distrust lingered, but for the first time since the alien invasion began, humanity was considering the possibility of true cooperation. There was a sense of urgency now. The alien fleet was poised to begin its final phase of occupation, and humanity had precious little time to rally. Yet, within the fractured leadership, a small flicker of hope had reignited. Could they come together in time to mount a final defense, or would their divisions once again spell their doom? The conference room was dimly lit, and the tension in the air was palpable. Gathered around the table were representatives of the remaining human factions, political leaders, military generals, and corporate heads. These individuals, who had once been rivals or indifferent to each other's causes, were now the last hope for Earth's survival. The stakes were painfully clear: unless they found a way to work together, humanity would be wiped out. Yet, the old grudges and mistrust ran deep. The British Prime Minister was the first to speak. "We are all aware of the situation. The alien fleet has shattered our defenses, and it's only a matter of time before they completely occupy the planet. Our forces are scattered, disorganized, and running low on resources. If we don't unite, there will be nothing left to save." A Russian general, his face hardened by years of combat, leaned forward. "And what exactly do you propose? We've been at each other's throats for years. Now you expect us to suddenly join hands and fight together? I doubt your forces would even follow our orders, let alone trust us in a battle." The Prime Minister's jaw tightened. "We don't have a choice. Whatever differences we have must be put aside. We're on the brink of extinction." Across the table, the CEO of a powerful defense corporation raised an eyebrow. "Easy for you to say. My people have invested billions in defending our own territories. If we start sharing resources and tech, how do we know we won't be left with nothing when this is over?" The room erupted into arguments. Every leader had their own agenda, their own interests to protect. Some argued for maintaining autonomy, fearing betrayal if they surrendered control of their forces to a unified command. Others were simply too skeptical, believing that their allies would turn against them the moment the alien threat was over. The distrust was thick, and despite the looming danger, the leaders were more focused on protecting their own interests than on humanity's survival. In the midst of the chaos, a former admiral, who had remained silent until now, stood up. His presence commanded attention, and the room slowly fell quiet. He had once been one of Earth's most respected military minds, but had left his post after political infighting led to disastrous losses early in the invasion. Now, he was their last hope. "This bickering will kill us all," the Admiral began, his voice steady and resolute. "I don't care about your politics, your profits, or your personal interests. What I care about is humanity's survival. If we don't act now, if we don't trust each other, there won't be anyone left to govern or profit from." He paused, letting his words sink in. The room remained silent, the weight of the moment heavy on everyone's shoulders. "I have a plan," The Admiral continued. But it won't be easy. We need to unite all of our forces, military, corporate, civilian, under a single command. We'll launch a full-scale counterattack, but not in the way the aliens expect. We'll use guerrilla tactics, unconventional warfare. We'll strike at their weak points, disrupt their supply lines, hit them where it hurts. It's risky, but it's our only shot. The room buzzed with murmurs. The Admiral's plan was bold, but it required absolute trust. For years, these factions had operated independently, often working against one another. Now, he was asking them to place their faith in a unified effort, to rely on people they barely knew or, worse, mistrusted. One of the corporate representatives voiced what many were thinking. And how do we know this won't backfire? What's to stop one of us from turning on the others once the battle's over? The Admiral's gaze was cold. If we don't win this battle, there won't be anything left to turn on each other for. His words struck a chord with some, but not all. Some of the military leaders, hardened by years of losses, were still hesitant. They had seen plans fail before. Others feared that the resources they would commit to this fight might leave them vulnerable if it all went wrong. Time was running out, and the alien forces were closing in for the final blow, but the divisions among the leaders were still too great. Frustration began to mount. Some of the leaders looked ready to walk out, while others whispered in hushed tones, trying to rally support for their own agendas. The Admiral could feel the unity he was trying to build slipping through his fingers. Just as the talks seemed on the verge of collapsing, a communication officer burst into the room, her face pale. The aliens are preparing for full-scale occupation. Their forces are advancing. If we don't act now, they'll take the remaining cities within days. The room fell silent. The realization hit everyone like a cold wave. This was their last chance. The arguments, the doubts, the mistrust, they didn't matter anymore. If they didn't unite now, they wouldn't have the luxury of worrying about betrayal or lost resources. The enemy was at the gates, and their survival depended on their ability to put aside their differences and fight as one. One by one, the leaders began to agree. Slowly, but surely, they started to see the bigger picture. The Prime Minister nodded, the Russian general reluctantly agreed, and even the corporate leaders began to realize that their profits wouldn't mean much if there was no planet left to protect. We do this together, the Admiral said, his voice firm. Or we don't do it at all. With that, a fragile, tentative agreement was formed. The various factions, although still mistrustful, pledged their forces and resources to the unified cause. The new fleet, although fragmented in trust, was now assembled. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. They would fight under a single banner, not as separate nations or corporations, but as the last defenders of humanity. The moment of unity had finally arrived. It wasn't easy, and the divisions still lingered, but for the first time since the invasion began, humanity was prepared to fight as one. The united human fleet began to gather in the shadows of space, moving silently, carefully hidden from the alien sensors. There were no grand proclamations or fanfare, just a quiet determination as each ship took its position. Despite the damage and the losses, humanity had managed to assemble a fleet, small, but deadly in its intent. The fleet's commanders knew they couldn't match the aliens ship for ship, so they had crafted a plan that relied on stealth, speed, and surprise. Their first move was a series of hit-and-run attacks. Small squadrons, equipped with advanced stealth technology, darted in and out of alien-occupied zones, targeting supply ships and communication relays. The attacks were swift, and by the time the alien forces attempted to react, the human ships were already gone, leaving only destruction in their wake. These tactics left the alien commanders baffled. For months, they had observed humanity's crumbling defenses, assuming they had broken the spirit of resistance. Yet, out of nowhere, these coordinated attacks began to unravel their carefully laid plans. The alien commanders, so sure of their superiority, had not expected such a sudden and bold resurgence. They had assumed that any resistance would be fragmented, disorganized, and easy to crush. But this was something entirely different. In the alien command center, their once confident posture began to falter. How are they doing this? One of the commanders demanded, staring at a tactical display where several of their supply routes had been obliterated. This is not the human force we faced before. What's changed? Another commander responded, his voice tense with disbelief. They've unified. These are coordinated strikes, not random acts of desperation. Their fleet, designed for large-scale, direct engagements, was now being picked apart by smaller, faster human forces employing tactics they hadn't anticipated. The aliens had relied on their overwhelming firepower and numbers, but now their massive ships were vulnerable to precision attacks. With each hit, their logistics became more strained, their supply lines frayed. It was clear they had underestimated the adaptability of humanity. The alien commanders were forced to rethink their entire strategy. Their plans for full-scale occupation were disrupted as human forces hit key positions and vital infrastructure with precision. The aliens, bound by rigid protocols and accustomed to overwhelming their enemies with brute force, struggled to adjust to the human guerrilla tactics. Their ships, large and heavily armed, were cumbersome compared to the agile human craft that slipped through their defenses. In space, the battles were fierce. The human fleet, though outnumbered, fought with relentless determination. The first major engagement occurred near the remnants of Earth's last orbital defense platform. A group of human ships had used the debris field as cover, ambushing a convoy of alien warships. The alien vessels, heavily armed but slow to maneuver, were caught off guard. Human pilots, utilizing their intimate knowledge of the battlefield and improvised strategies, launched a coordinated strike. In one daring move, a squadron of human fighters led a surprise attack on the alien flagship, targeting its critical systems. The alien defenses were formidable, but the humans exploited a weakness in the ship's shielding that they had discovered during the earlier phases of the war. The battle was intense, the stakes higher than ever. Despite heavy losses, the humans managed to disable the ship's primary weapon systems, forcing the alien fleet to retreat. The alien commanders, now aware of the human fleet's growing momentum, were in disbelief. They had considered humanity to be little more than a nuisance, an inferior species on the verge of extinction. But now, they were being outmaneuvered at every turn. Their arrogance had blinded them to the reality of human resilience and ingenuity. As the battles continued, the alien forces found themselves on the defensive. Human forces, once divided and disorganized, were now working together like a finely tuned machine. Each faction, whether military or corporate, contributed to the effort in ways that complemented the others. The result was a series of victories that slowly began to wear down the alien fleet. One such critical battle took place near an alien outpost on one of Jupiter's moons. Human ships used the natural electromagnetic interference of the planet's radiation belt to mask their approach. When they struck, the alien garrison was caught completely off guard. The human forces overwhelmed the outpost, disrupting a critical communication hub that linked the alien fleet to their main command center. The victory was a psychological blow as much as a tactical one. The aliens had begun to realize that they were not as invincible as they had once believed. In each engagement, the human fleet took calculated risks that paid off. Their ships, though fewer in number, were faster and more maneuverable, making it difficult for the alien fleet to pin them down. The human commanders adapted on the fly, using innovative strategies that the aliens, bound by their strict protocols, couldn't predict. As these victories began to pile up, the alien commanders found themselves in an increasingly desperate situation. Their ships were being destroyed or damaged at a rate they couldn't sustain. Supplies were running low, and their forces were spread too thin to maintain control over Earth's territories. Every time they tried to regroup, another human attack would disrupt their efforts. In a particularly devastating strike, human forces managed to sabotage a key alien supply base in orbit around Mars. Using a combination of cyber warfare and sabotage, they disabled the base's defenses long enough to launch an all-out assault. The destruction of the base not only crippled the alien supply chain but also sent a clear message. Humanity was no longer just defending itself, it was taking the fight to the invaders. The alien commanders were now faced with an impossible choice. They could continue to fight and risk losing their entire fleet to these relentless, unconventional tactics, or they could retreat and cut their losses. The human fleet, though still smaller and less equipped, was gaining momentum with each passing day. The aliens had never anticipated this level of resistance from a species they had thought inferior. As the Alien Command Center received yet another report of a lost battle, the commanders knew they were running out of options. The human forces had proven themselves to be a far more formidable opponent than they had ever imagined. Their arrogance had blinded them to the true potential of humanity, and now they were paying the price. The final decision loomed over them. Would they press on, risking total destruction, or would they retreat and admit that they had gravely underestimated their enemy? The battle for Earth had taken a turn no one had expected, and the alien commanders were left to grapple with the harsh reality of their failure. In the Alien Command Center, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The alien commanders, once confident in their inevitable conquest of Earth, now sat in disbelief. The human forces, once fractured and on the verge of collapse, had mounted a resistance that none of them had anticipated. Every report that came in painted a clearer picture. Their losses were mounting, their supply lines were severed, and their fleet was being slowly dismantled by the relentless human counterattacks. The leaders of the alien armada, faced with the unexpected resilience of their enemy, were divided in their next course of action. One of the more aggressive commanders slammed his fist on the table. "We should burn the planet to ashes. These humans are more trouble than they're worth. If we destroy Earth entirely, we rid ourselves of this problem once and for all." Another commander, cooler in demeanor, shook his head. "And lose all the resources we came here for? The humans are dangerous, yes, but they're not invincible. We underestimated them, but we can still overwhelm them if we focus our forces." A third commander, who had been observing the battles more closely, spoke with quiet authority. "This isn't just about force anymore. These humans are unpredictable, adaptable. Their ability to rally at the last moment and turn the tide of battle is unlike anything we've encountered before. If we push them too far, we risk provoking an even greater resistance. We cannot afford to lose more ships." The room fell silent. The alien commanders were grappling with a reality they had not foreseen. Their strict military doctrine, which had worked so well against other species, was failing them here. The humans were not just fighting with technology, they were fighting with sheer willpower, with the kind of defiance that couldn't be crushed by conventional tactics. It was a miscalculation they couldn't ignore. The debate raged on. Some argued for a final, devastating strike on the planet, hoping to force the humans into submission through sheer terror. Others, more cautious, pointed out that humanity had already proven they wouldn't break so easily. Destroying the planet wouldn't guarantee their victory. It might only galvanize the survivors into even greater acts of defiance. In the end, the decision was clear. The mounting losses were too great to ignore. The alien fleet, though powerful, had suffered crippling damage, and they could not sustain the war at this rate. Their only option was to retreat, regroup, and reassess their strategy. They had underestimated humanity, and it had cost them dearly. As the order to retreat was given, the alien fleet began to pull back. But the humans weren't about to let them escape without a fight. As the alien ships started their withdrawal, the human fleet, now fully unified and coordinated, launched a final offensive. The target, the alien command ship. It was the heart of their fleet, the symbol of their power, and the humans knew that taking it down would send a message that couldn't be ignored. The battle was fierce. The alien command ship, heavily armed and protected by several escort ships, fought back with everything it had. But the human fleet, having learned from the past engagements, attacked with precision. They used hit-and-run tactics, drawing the alien defenses out of position before striking at their weakest points. Human pilots, now seasoned veterans of this long war, flew with deadly accuracy, their attacks coordinated in a way the alien commanders had never expected. The alien fleet, though still formidable, was no match for the relentless human assault. In a final, decisive blow, a squadron of human fighters managed to breach the defenses of the alien command ship. They targeted its engines and communication systems, crippling it beyond repair. The alien fleet, seeing their flagship disabled, had no choice but to retreat in disarray. The human forces, battered but unbroken, watched as the alien ships vanished into the depths of space. They had done the impossible. The alien fleet, which had once seemed invincible, was in full retreat. Humanity had won, not through superior technology or firepower, but through unity, resilience, and an unshakable will to survive. In the aftermath of the battle, the surviving human leaders gathered to reflect on what had just occurred. The victory, while decisive, had come at a great cost. Cities lay in ruins, millions had perished, and the scars of the invasion would remain for generations. Yet, despite all of this, humanity had survived. They had faced the brink of extinction and, through sheer determination, had pushed back against a force that had seemed unbeatable. The leaders, many of whom had once been divided by politics and ideology, now stood united. They knew that their victory had been possible only because they had put aside their differences and worked together. It was a hard-earned lesson, one that they would carry with them as they began the long process of rebuilding their world. There was a somber mood in the air as they looked out at the stars. The alien threat had been driven away, but the experience had changed humanity forever. They had seen the true cost of division, and they had learned that their strength lay not in their technology or their military might, but in their ability to unite in the face of overwhelming odds. As the leaders discussed the future, they acknowledged the enormity of the task that lay ahead. Rebuilding Earth would take years, maybe decades, but they were confident that they could do it. The unity that had been forged in the fires of battle would now be the foundation of a new world, one that was stronger and more resilient than ever before. But there was also a sense of caution. The aliens had retreated, but they had not been defeated completely. Somewhere out there, beyond the stars, the alien commanders were regrouping, planning their next move. Humanity had won this battle, but the war was far from over. The leaders knew that they would need to remain vigilant, prepared for whatever challenges might come next. As they looked to the future, they also looked to the stars. The universe was vast, and humanity had just taken its first steps into a much larger world. The threat of the alien invasion had shown them that they were not alone, and that the battles ahead would require not just strength, but unity, resolve, and the will to survive. And so, as humanity began to rebuild, they did so with a renewed sense of purpose. They had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. Now they would face the future together, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, they were stronger, more united, and more prepared than ever before.